Welcome, thank you very much. Good afternoon, thank you for coming, thank you for inviting me here. I'm Scot McKee, I'm the Managing Director of a brand and digital agency called Birddog, based in central London. I'm reasonably well known in the B2B marketing world, but you guys don't know me from Adam, so allow me to explain. I'm the guy that nobody calls. Okay, at least I'm the guy that nobody calls first. So what I do is bring brands to life. I build business brands. I fix business brands that are broken. And sometimes I have to break business brands in order to fix them. So people tend to call me last. Okay, they've tried everything else, and when that hasn't worked, for them, I get the call. The reason I'm here today is I wrote a book. Creative B2B branding, no really. And in the title was meant to be an idea that business brands can be creative. They tend not to be, but they can be. And I wanted to write that story. And your esteemed leader for the week was pretty formative in helping me do that, telling me I could and that I should, and facilitated that it happened. So it's great that I have an opportunity to thank him publicly. So I thought, for context for today, I ought to do a summary of where we are. So a summary of me is that I've been in this business for the last 25 years. It's been 25 years of pain, mainly, trying to show business brands how to get in touch with their emotional side. Just when I thought it was safe and I knew what I was doing, we had the digital marketing revolution, and that caused even more pain. And on top of that, we had social media in a business marketing environment. So if I try and summarize the B2B market over that period, business brands have spent lifetimes trying to communicate function over form. Okay? Their interest is the dogmatic repetition of product specification, features and benefits that nobody really cares about. Okay? The customer doesn't care about the features and benefits. And then social media came along there as well and scared the crap out of everyone, because suddenly businesses couldn't just push their corporate message to the market. The market was deciding for itself what it wanted to listen to and what it wanted to talk about. And that's changed everything. So a summary of you, and this may be wrong, but the way I see it, you're here to learn about the B2B marketing space, and you're doing it at a very unusual time. You're doing it at a time of financial uncertainty. We're in the middle of the biggest banking crisis ever. The Eurozone economic meltdown is happening as I stand here now. We're looking at what's considered to be an almost endless global recession. And on top of all of that, there are fundamental changes happening in the business market space. So for you, pain's only just begun. So let me try and set some objectives for the time that we're going to spend today. I thought if I could offer some insight of some of the new media realities, that might be helpful to you. If I can encourage you to challenge the traditional B2B marketing conventions, that could be valuable to you. And generally, if I can prepare you for the shitstorm heading your way when you finish this course, that would be a good thing. So that's what I'm going to try and do. In order to do that, we need to answer a question, first of all. It's a fairly simple question, and I've read Paul's notes, so I know you've covered the ground, so it should be quite easy. Question is, what is a brand? We need to be on the same page to start with. So anybody, tell me what a brand is.
Personality.
Personality, good, yep. Anyone else?
Special meaning for consumer.
Yes, it is. It is that special meaning. Good, okay, we're in the right territory. They've been listening, Paul, well done.
I was worried there. Is it an identity?
Sorry, say again?
Identity.
Identity, well, it depends. It's a personal identity, a brand identity, but I think we need to separate that from corporate identity, which can be confused with logos and badges. We'll come on to that in a second. So,
that to aspire for?
Yes, aspirational. Brands should be aspirational. Good. Okay, I'm going to use the answer that I like, my preferred answer, and here it is. A brand is a perception or collection of perceptions in the mind of an audience or audiences. Okay, so we're talking about perceptions, we're talking about what people think, what they feel. Okay, that's how I would define a brand experience. Here's another good one from Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. A brand is what people say about you when you've left the room. Okay? It's what they're thinking, and our job is to get inside their heads. Okay, so in a B2B context then, just for clarity, a burnt cow's arse is not a brand. Okay, so we're not talking about branding irons, and we're not talking about logos, the point earlier about the corporate identity. That's a badge. Okay, the badge represents a brand, but it's not the brand. It's not the feeling that you have about the brand. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. This is a brand. Okay, what we're feeling when we think about a particular company, a particular product, a particular service. Yeah, your brand is what people feel about you, and you want it to be a good feeling, obviously. So in financial terms, we're talking about the intangible, okay? The intangible assets on a balance sheet. Coca-Cola famously is worth more on its balance sheet for its intangible assets, the name Coca-Cola, than it is for all its bottling plants or factories and so on. Okay, the value is in what we feel, what the audience feels about the product. So traditionally, up until 2 or 3 years ago, we have, as marketeers, controlled people's perceptions with stuff. Okay, all kinds of stuff. It's been churned out of the corporate marketing office, and it takes many forms. I've put a few here. So advertising, direct mail, collateral production, white paper writing. All of these things get spewed out of the corporate machine and forced onto the customer for them to understand what the company wants them to believe in. But what happens when there's no stuff anymore? Only people. And that's the environment that we find ourselves in now, in a digital economy, in a social landscape. Okay, we're not able to push the stuff at people anymore because they're talking on their own networks, they're talking amongst themselves and making their own decisions. So the people now connect to devices, to networks, within their own communities, and they're not engaging with the traditional stuff that we used to produce in order to influence them. Okay, a business brand is always on. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, your brand is accessible. Doesn't matter whether you're up a mountain, whether you're on a beach, in public places, your brand is still accessible, and indeed in private places. Okay, it's a very random fact that 85% of women of a certain age check their Facebook status before they go to the toilet in the morning. You don't need to put your hands on it, it's okay. Okay, but your brand is always being represented, and therefore our job is to continue to shape the perceptions of the audience. And to do that, in social spaces, the focus therefore has to be the content that we produce, not the stuff, but content. So we're not talking about old business content, corporate content that was just produced like a machine. We're talking about new customer content. Okay, content that's suitable for customers and indeed produced by customers even. So to influence brand perceptions, content now has to be customer focused, customer relevant. They need to want to hear about it as opposed to you wanting to tell them. There's a significant difference there. It has to be customer endorsed. So within social communities now, the brand has to be endorsed by the people who are consuming that information. And even customer generated. So fans of a product or service will recommend it and refer it and produce their own video, write their own blogs, distribute their own content about the product. And that all influences the brand that you would be trying to control. So the role of brand development in the B2B space is shifting from businesses controlling everything to the business facilitating the brand conversation. Okay? The business no longer controls it, and it's a big problem for the business because they don't know how to do it. It's very uncomfortable for a business to think that the rest of the world is controlling their brand rather than them being able to do it themselves. So trying to select the right message to shape audience perceptions has become very different and difficult from pushing that corporate message. Social ideas and concepts that engage the customer are not typically aligned to the traditional corporate selling model. We produce the features and benefits list, we give it to the sales team, and they go and sell our product and service. It doesn't work like that anymore. There's a whole world of social interaction where audiences are deciding for themselves what's relevant, what's important, and whether and how they should buy. They're prepared to buy, they're happy to buy products and services, but not necessarily based on the traditional corporate information that was being rammed down their throats. So determining what's good and what's bad in this landscape is quite difficult, and it's new. So we're all learning how to do that. And I thought it would be helpful to show you some of the work that we've been doing in this area so that we can take something away in terms of how it's happened. We're needing to balance the client expectation, a traditional client following a traditional model, and the crowd, the marketplace, online, that are making their own minds up. So I've got a couple of examples here, and there's a third one that we're going to talk about a little later on. But two very different examples with different outcomes. And hopefully that'll highlight the challenge that we're all facing at the moment. Powwow Now is the UK's leading conference calling service provider. So conference calling, hopefully we're all familiar with. Yes, everyone's nodding. Okay, so I don't need to explain that. You make a call. You can either travel to meetings, or you can make a phone call and have group meetings on a conference call. Great. There's not much else to say about it apart from that. So you can imagine the difficulty in selling the brand. We were given the task of building a social community for Powwow Now to raise their brand awareness in a business marketplace. And the agreed strategy was to step away from conference calling as the official product in order to engage a community in something more interesting, something that they would be prepared to talk about and engage with. And so we were looking for a creative concept that we could build this message onto. And what we produced was something called Love-Hate Travel. Okay, a love-hate travel community. And rather than simply selling conference calling, we were trying to create debate about commuter journeys, about the good things and bad things associated to having meetings, traveling, commuting to work, having to travel long distances in order to have a meeting when perhaps you could have a conference call instead. So using the things that people were very familiar with in order to bring an association with a conference calling alternative. And we felt we could build a community around that because everybody bitches and moans about their journey to work, and we could harness that and build on the back of it. So a single concept that was rolled out online across just about every platform. I'll show you some of those in a second, but using a sponsorship branding model. So it wasn't all about Powwow Now, it was all about Love-Hate Travel and your journey to work. It was sponsored by Powwow Now. And that meant that we could shape the content and the discussion within this community that every now and again, where appropriate, we could influence the audience with a conference calling alternative. We delivered that over a 6-month period on just about every platform. So Twitter was a main platform for us, Facebook, YouTube, we created content, we harnessed discussions, we built communities within Twitter and so on. And we integrated that with traditional media sources as well. So we were using London Underground posters, tube posters, taxi cabs. We used guerrilla marketing. You can see the guys in their blue boiler suits there were handing out travel goodie bags at Waterloo Station, and we were producing videos about commutes to work and so on, all of which created more content that we could feed back into the community and generate more discussion. Okay, so it became a self-perpetuating thing. We produced content that was distributable, so finding information, statistics, creating information in an engaging way that people would want to share with their own networks and their own communities. Again, sponsored by Powwow Now, but taking a different angle from the hard sell. So this distributable content is easy. It spreads very quickly around and fast and wide across personal and corporate networks, and putting the brand message in front of people as it happens. And after a 5-month period, we had a community of about 55,000 people. 11,000 people a month were joining the Love Hate Travel site. We were engaging with hundreds of those people individually on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on every day. So it was a growing community. Everybody loved it. The whole idea of Love Hate Travel and having somewhere to vent your frustrations about travel and talk about it was a great thing. Everybody liked that. Brand awareness was high. Brand awareness of Love Hate Travel was high. Brand awareness of Powwow Now was high. But sales conversion were low. Yeah. So ultimately, after 5 months, it was a project intended to run for a year. After 5 months, the client didn't feel able to continue investing in the community and cancelled it. So the question is, was it a success or a failure? Yeah. Not according to the client. Okay. And I think this is the area, this is the territory that businesses are struggling with now. So my answer is it was a social success, but a sales failure. As we look at B2B marketing in the coming years, being able to balance the need of corporate sales, the corporate sales engine, and how the social communities work is the challenge that we all face. So by all measures, against the objectives that were set of building a community, this was a success. Did it generate sales? No. Would it have generated sales if we continued into the future? We'll never know. I'd like to think it would. But what we're learning is that if we're going to engage on brand development online and expect the community to support that, it takes time. It takes time to earn the trust and for it to lead to direct sales, which is very different to the traditional model of marketing generates leads to sales. Okay, so the social activity is going to support the sales process, not replace it in the short term. Here's another example, because when it goes right, it can go very right, very fast. This is the Ringo story, where our objective was to harness positive brand sentiment to influence customers and prospects. Okay? Ringo is a mobile parking solution service provider. So across car parks in the UK, at train stations, bus stations, city centres, multi-storey car parks, you can either feed the meter with coins, or you can use a service like Ringo, which is a mobile application. It's available literally as an app on an iPhone, or you can use text, or you can use voice. It's voice activated, where you call a number, the initial registration takes less than a minute, and thereafter it recognises you, and you just speak into the phone about where you are, where you want to park, and the job's done. It's a great piece of technology. But typically, Ringo is a third-party mobile service provider. So they're not necessarily providing this technology directly to their customer. They're going through a third party. And in this story, there are good guys and bad guys. Okay? The bad guys were a rail operator and the primary parking services provider, who had been using Ringo as their third-party service and thought they could do better themselves. And they were going to try and replace the Ringo parking service with their own offering, which was less efficient and less secure. But they could get away with it because they held the contract and nobody really cared. It's only parking, after all, right? Who cares about car parking? So our job was to harness the sentiment in the marketplace. Ringo has always had very positive customer sentiment, customer satisfaction. It's a great piece of kit that works, as opposed to other service offerings which kind of work but don't really. The customer journey is lumpy. The user experience is not good. Ringo's was always good. So they knew that they had a good piece of technology. What they didn't have was any way of representing that success to their customers, and more importantly, their prospective customers. So by the time they talked to us about the railway parking, that deal was kind of done. They were going to lose that contract. But they wanted to create an environment where they were capturing the positive sentiment so that future prospective customers would understand that independently there was a following for the company within the user base, an independent following of support that would allow them to succeed when they were trying to sell in. Don't take our word for it, have a look at what our customers think. So we were trying to capture the sentiment around that. We were given 3 weeks to do it in. Okay, there was a contract switchover date, and we had to engage the audience in advance of that contract expiring. So we had 3 weeks, which meant we had to start straight away. So we were briefed. It took about 20 minutes for us to take the brief for this campaign. It was agreed on a handshake. There were no purchase orders. There was no procurement team. There was no lengthy pitching process. 20 minutes and a handshake. And we agreed that when the client left our offices, that would be it. We wouldn't speak to them again for the 3-week period. Okay? It was unheard of for me. I'm pretty sure it's unheard of in the whole of business-to-business marketing. Okay, so we stripped away all of the typical red tape and bureaucracy associated with planning, approval. There were to be no delays at all. We had complete autonomy to deliver a campaign, and our solution was to create a blogging platform. It's all we had time for. Okay, so we were able to set up and establish a blogging platform to capture the community within 24 hours. Actually, we were able to do it within 3 hours, but sensibly 24 hours before we were up and running. So we gave it a name. We called it the Yellow Lines. Okay, and we gave it an image. Okay, how we felt about the process of parking. So that was to try and capture some emotion. And after that, we just had to hit the publish button. So we delivered an aggressive blogging campaign on WordPress. It was nothing fancy. It was delivered very quickly and easily. And we just kept going. And from almost the moment that we started, the community was responding. So everything that they said, we used to drive the campaign forward. So the comments coming in one day formed the content for the blog the next day. And so it rolled. And any of you familiar with any website and leaving comments, it's hard. The hardest part of delivering online communication is getting people to comment back. So the idea that on one blog post there, highlighted in red, we had 400 comments coming back on a single blog. Okay, so we knew we had the audience's attention, and we kept going. The focus then was on content. I was talking about that earlier, how you find the right content and use it to communicate the brand, as opposed to using the corporate content. There was very little in here about Ringo's parking solution. It was about the services being provided by alternatives and how it affected the customers. Okay, we knew we were getting somewhere. I could tell because on LinkedIn, looking at my LinkedIn profile, everyone that was viewing my profile were lawyers. Okay, so I knew we were touching some nerves and getting close, but we didn't step over the line. But we offered news and opinion. We offered a destination for customers for the first time. The content was driven by advocates, okay, people who were already supporting the brand. And it's quite an important distinction. Advocates aren't necessarily customers. Okay, you can get a lot of mileage out of marketing effort to fans as opposed to customers. Because if you have a big enough fan base, they'll bring the customers. They'll influence the customers. So we created a bridge to link multiple communities together. The audience themselves, the corporate brand Ringo, the parking services provider, the railway network, and the contractor. And for the first time, they were being forced to talk to each other. Highly visible online and totally transparent. So, did we achieve anything in that 21-day period? Well, yeah, a fair amount. On the first day, we had 14 views to the website, and 13 of them were probably me, okay, just checking that the thing was actually up and running. But thereafter, over that 20-day period, here's what happened. Okay, 16,500 unique hits to the website in 14 days, something like that. About a parking system. Yeah. How can you generate that much interest in a parking system? But it's something that they felt strongly about, and we provided a vehicle for them to communicate. So when we finished the campaign after the 21-day period, we had over 22,000 people. Unique people had visited the site. 800 comments had been left on those blogs. We'd achieved local news coverage, BBC radio coverage, and we'd encouraged this policy and review setting at a corporate level. So the customers themselves had started an email petition. We were standing back at this stage, nothing to do with us anymore. They were doing it themselves. Email petition was started by the supporters. The board of the railway company was having to respond to customers directly. Up until that point, it had just been customer services, cut and paste, standard customer services response. Now the board were having to get involved. We had 27 letters being submitted to members of parliament, outraged, you're changing our parking system. And the governing body for the rail regulators got involved as well, all in 21 days. And a quote from the founder of Ringo: "The Yellow Lines is an invaluable asset that has gathered all the positive user support we knew existed, but were never able to harness, and made it available for the whole world to share." And that is what we're trying to achieve with social marketing now. So those are a couple of examples, one big, one quite small, and finding these case studies are quite rare in B2B for digital and online delivery now. We're still coming up against the fear and inertia of corporate organizations and their lack of experience in trialing these kind of campaigns. So how are we going to drive change? What can we do about that to make it happen? And from our perspective, we're trying to do it by leading by example and showing people what you could do really simply and easily in business to promote and develop the brand. And if we can get that right, then we can move on to the really cool stuff afterwards. So I've said leading by example, one turdy brand step at a time. And I wanted to share this with you. I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago at the B2B Marketing Annual Conference. Okay. The full presentation is available online. If you want to have a look at that, do please go to the Birddog website and you can see the blog and check the full content there. Okay, and I finished off by talking about this engaging content creation, which was the reason I called the presentation Turdy Brand Trousers instead of a boring corporate business marketing title. Okay, finding something that people would want to share. Okay, that was the end of my presentation a couple of weeks ago, apart from the photo, because I tried to demonstrate live and direct on stage how this stuff works. And what I did was, at the start of my presentation, got my iPhone out and took a photo of the crowd. Okay? I told them I was doing it, and I gave them the choice of sitting there like lemons, which is what they were doing, or showing the world that they're a little bit more animated than that. And on the count of 3, they all threw their hands in the air and we got a good picture, and I tweeted it before I started my presentation. And it was a jolly cunning plan that I said at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a look at how many people have viewed this photo and how many people from the outside world we've brought into the room to demonstrate how social engagement could work. Okay, so there it is. Fans waving at you, that was it. Off it went. When I finished the presentation, I asked someone how many views there were, and they said 25. That's not good. And someone at the back of the room said, hit the refresh button, and it was 250. Okay, that's better. So we'd already brought more people into the room than were actually in the room in the time that it took for me to give the presentation. In 10 minutes, it had been retweeted 26 times. And in 15 minutes, it achieved top tweet status. I don't know how familiar you are with these, but top tweet is, close as you can get to trending. Okay. From nowhere, for a photo of people waving. By the end of the day, 400 people had looked at it, so we're already at about four times the delegation. And less than a week later, the viewing figures passed 1,000. This was a couple of weeks ago. I think the figures are at about 2,000 now. Okay, so we've gone from an audience of 100 to 2,000 people engaging with this kind of content. Okay, it could have ended there. That story could have just been over. But the crowd had taken control, right? And the crowd had other plans. So at that point, on Twitter, people started talking about the presentation. They thought it was quite good. They were enjoying it. And that was just the start. So once one person kicks it off, everyone else comes in on the back of it. So that was during the presentation. That's while I was standing there talking. So after the presentation, I wrote a blog about it. I thought this is quite cool. And people were interested in it. So I wrote a, 300-word blog post. And that's all I said. My blog, Turdy Brown Trousers. And it all kicked off again and started to be syndicated. Then it started getting picked up by competitors. So Proximity are an agency in London. They're in 63 countries worldwide, 2,000 staff, a little bit bigger than my company, but they're already picking up on my content and using it in their social media presentations. They're using my quotes and telling my stories. So we're starting to achieve thought leadership. Okay? And this is how we build brands online. And within those conversations, we see the three key elements of building a brand, or escalating that brand support. So from an initial supporter, love, love, love Turdy Brown Trousers, great, you love my presentation, to becoming a fan and saying, I want more, what else have you got? Was it videoed? It was videoed. And then ultimately becoming an advocate of the brand. So at that point, he's doing my job for me. Fantastic. I'll be rethinking the way I do every speaker slot, training session and seminar from now on. Okay, this guy is going to be saying nice things about my brand from now on. Okay, so there was a video, and at that point I thought, okay, well, people want to see the video, we'll release that. And off we went again. Okay, Turdy Brown Trousers, the movie, and people started talking about that. And the final accolade is content aggregation from third parties. So someone ended up writing a blog about the blog. Okay, writing a blog about the blog and the presentation and being complimentary about that. So they're amplifying my voice now and the content that I'm creating. And all those roads will ultimately lead back to my brand. So content aggregation, syndication, amplification. Those are the ways we're trying to build brands at the moment. Now, this isn't an ad. I haven't paid for it. It's not sponsorship. I didn't even ask for it. But it happens in a social space. It can happen. It's what we're aiming to happen. So the future of a B2B brand will be determined by its social audience, whether you like it or not. Out came the movie. We posted it on YouTube last week, I think. 1 hour after it went up, it had 30 views. That's not a big number. I'm not expecting to be going to Hollywood anytime soon. But in context, I can give one of these presentations a day. All right? So in context, in the first hour, I've effectively distributed a month's worth of presentations. Okay, people listening to what I have to say. 1 week after we put the slide deck on SlideShare, there were 700 views of that deck. It's something like 850 now. Okay, and again in context, that's effectively over 2 years worth of presentations in a week. Okay, so you can see how this spreads, how we're amplifying our brand online. So from now on, revenue will come from a bunch of people you barely know, learning of your brand from a bunch of people they barely know. but they trust implicitly. And that's what businesses have to get their head around now, is how they can achieve trust for their brand online and allow their communities to do the work for them. So, final takeaways from today. I've shown you a large social campaign, small social campaign, and even a personal social campaign. We haven't even touched on what could happen, you know, the technology and the creative development of it, what could happen when business brands start to allow it, start to lighten up a bit. That's another story for another day. But my 3 top tips. Listen. Customers will talk about you and your brand all the time, whether you're listening or not. Be social. If you're not active in social spaces, start looking at it and thinking about it from a business context. Talking about it isn't the same as doing it. And hurry up, because your competitors are already starting. Okay, B2B brands can be built online. My job to make it possible, my job to show you how, but it's going to be your job to make it happen. I hope that was helpful. I am online in social spaces. You'll find me. Do keep in touch. Thank you very much.